Hey everybody, this is Gene with EbikeLink, here to talk to you about the 2025 RFN Rally Pro 6.5. This beast just got delivered a couple of minutes ago, so let's get it unboxed, assembled, and on the dirt. All right, we're back, and we're going to pop the top off of this. I've got my wire cutters, I've got my screwdriver, and my wrench. That should at least get us to where we can get the top off and the cage off. So we'll start with the cutters here. Lid comes off. Bonk. Okay. That wasn't quite tied up there. Move the front wheel. All right, let's get this additional packing material off here. Now we've got the brake in the way. We'll get him out of the way. The wheel spacers, those are in your toolkit here. So we've got our, it's literally labeled tools. And you've got the large one on the disc side, and you've got the shorter one on the other side. So we'll spin this around. Yeah, and sometimes the spacers will come out. That's normal. Cool. So here we go. All right, I'm going to release some of the pressure here. Nice and easy. And that should allow me to bring the other side up. Bam. Oh, it wants to rock, so let's get that slightly elevated. Cool. Now, we've got our other axle nut here. I'm just going to put a little bit of tension there. All right. I'm going to reposition the bike and we're going to go to the next phase. Let's get the front brake on and then we'll start moving through the rest. So the caliper mount bolts are 5 mil. Actually looking at the rotors now, and the RFN model now has the floating rotors, that's pretty cool. So the beta is the one that had the floating rotors, and that was a Gen 2 bike. So this is officially, I'll call it unofficially, because I just came up with this, but this is the 5th iteration of this bike, the one that we're working on right now. And the betas were, those were the 2nd generation bikes. So, all right, caliper goes on. We're gonna finger tight these. And the reason why we're gonna finger tight is, you want to align the caliper. And just as a side note, anytime you remove the wheel, you mess with your caliper, you adjust your chain, you always want to loosen your caliper and squeeze the brake, and while holding the brake, tighten the caliper. That allows you to realign it. Otherwise, you can get really odd pad wear. So I'm going to save that for a little bit later. We've got this this kind of clamp that clamps the front hose. That is going to be a 4mm, I remember from a while ago. And we've got these nylon nuts, and that's easily a 10mm, which, look at that, their tool set. I always underestimate the tool sets that come with bikes, I gotta say. But I'm sure that there's something to that. They include it for this exact reason. So people don't necessarily need tools, or they have the tools that they need for assembly. Not a huge fan of cheap tools like this, but in this case it worked. Okay, so I got the bar clamp moved forward. There's only 2 positions, so the most forward position, and now I'm going to get the handlebars mounted. I am going to leverage my impact again, because these are pretty laborious. I'm going to get my bars as close as I think I can get them. Ooh, that's pretty good, Mr. Gene. So you want to make sure that the distance between the upper and the lower portion here is as close to even as possible. And the torque spec on these guys I use, I'm not saying that you should. Remember, we're going to consult the torque spec manual. But I'm going with 25, because that's what I've used in the past. I am, consider that dead nuts on. That is a 4. All right. No real torque spec for that, just the old German torque spec, the Guten Tight. Now you can put the headlight on. So it's got these rubber grommets and these posts here. There's also this wire for the display. Can be super tricky getting that on there because it's the wire isn't quite long enough. So you kind of have to do a little bit of creative routing here. Oh, I haven't had one quite this short, so I'm gonna pull on that a little bit. Yeah. No. There's been an instance where I've had to remove the top plate, which it looks like I'm gonna have to. That kind of blows. Okay. So there's a little tab that you can press down with a flathead screwdriver and get the display to come off. There we go. A few more wires to tuck. All right, I'm gonna get some needle nose, and this is just more difficult than it has to be. I'm gonna step around here. Maybe I can get a better angle. I guess I can. Interesting, right? Like this takes so much time for these silly fenders. they've made so many other slight improvements on this assembly that I can't hate on them too much. Maybe this is something that they'll remedy, in the next design change. One can only hope. All right, fenders are on. So bolt, kickstand, shim. So I'm not really putting a whole bunch of tension on there. I would just recommend that you get it to where there's little to no wiggle on the kickstand. Cool. All right. Now, here's the tricky part. This freaking spring. So I'm a gas bike guy, have been for over 3 decades. And so I have a spring puller. I'm going to show you what it looks like here in a second. And I highly recommend getting one because the screwdriver method, although it works, gosh, you could, really damage your face if that went wrong. So let me grab that spring puller. I'll be right back. All right, so I've got my spring puller. Tusk at Rocky Mountain, Motion Pro. There's a number of spring pullers out there. I recommend, again, that you get one. And this is my best way of installing it. So you want to grab one spring and you want to grab the inside spring. And you want to use the bike as leverage to rest your body up against. There. Bam. Kickstand mania. Foot pegs. You'll see you've got 6 positions. I've experimented a lot with these different positions. I'm 6'1". I told you, ape-like arms. I have a 34-inch inseam, so I'm actually like pretty big for this bike. And with the bars in the forward position, I put these in the 3rd position. Now, I mean, who knows? There might be some different geometry with this new one. I don't know, but that's just what geometry. I meant ergonomics. Nonetheless, hopefully you knew what I was saying. All right, I'm going to leave those loose for now because I want the bike to be like on its own weight, but I'm going to put the battery in there as well. I wonder. All right. There we go. Come on, man. Pop that in there. cover the charge port. Now, this is very important. Very, very important. As you can see, there's no breaker. Breaker is actually inside the battery. This is your BMS connection. When you connect this, it turns the battery on. If you do this before this becomes live and low chance, but something could happen. So you always want to plug the power first, lock it in there with the green tab, and then put the BMS connector on. And then when you're removing the battery, you want to do BMS first, the BMS connector first, and then the power. Just think of your BMS connector as like your on-off switch, so to speak. All right, lock the battery back in there. Get your pins. And then the seat wing nut. We actually have a couple of more things. All right, let me get the bike down. Roll that out of the way. Let's first tighten the foot pegs here. And I thought I could cheat, so I didn't get in the way of your view, but this is a 13, by the way. Cool. Now, the last thing is aligning those calipers. We spoke about it earlier. I'm actually going to do the rear first. Well, maybe the rear doesn't want to come off. There we go. I'll tell you, these bike manufacturers, they have torque specs for their bikes, but when they assemble them, I'm not sure that they adhere to them. Just saying. All right, holding the brake and then tightening the bolts. And I'm not tightening them as much as the factory did. On this front, you want to go bottom to top. Okay, so tighten the bottom one first, and then tighten the top one. Cool. Well, I think that's it, folks. I cannot wait to ride this thing. I'm going to get cleaned up. have a meeting that starts in an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm not sure I'm going to get to record today, but the next video I'm going to highlight the differences because I'm super excited. I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, wow, I can't wait to take the decals off and like really look at this bike and see what is different. You know, rotors, shock, bar clamps, forks, chrome stanchions, like a lot of differences. So we'll go over those in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.